So on March 4th, UNESCO actually declared a global crisis that was occurring across the world in terms of higher education, how disruptive it has been. And it's something that nobody has ever seen before. And so for context, on March 4th, when they made this statement, there were about 364 million students that were affected across the world, meaning their schools were shut down and they were starting to, the countries were getting in shutdown mode. So the students all of a sudden found themselves at home. So this was on March 4th. A week later, it was 394 million. A week later, it was 872 million. And a week later, it was 1.6 billion students. So, and across 191 countries. And so that's what's actually, I think, the world has faced, and which meant that every institution, every university in the world had to even high schools, every level of educational institutions had to start figuring out overnight, how do we respond to this crisis and how do we enable continuity of education for students? That was the number one big stress point for these institutional leaders. And so they obviously jumped on online in a crisis mode without a lot of capabilities. But with that, what we have seen also from a Coursera standpoint, we've seen a flood of students, flood of users coming to Coursera. Now, what you see here is a chart. While this whole disruption was going on in the physical educational space, I think the online education really became the go-to for anybody who wanted to, was worried about, but also who wanted to continue their education journey, right? And so what you see here is a chart that literally, as the shutdowns were happening through March and into April, you see this, it's not even exponential. This is like a vertical curve of enrollments that we've seen on our site. And especially we've also seen enrollments from new users to Coursera were up almost 20 times. And this was also happening across the world, to map the fact that 191 countries were going into shutdown mode. We were looking at like, hey, is this regional, local? How is this happening? So we looked at across the board. You could see US, South Asia, Latin America, UK, Western Europe, Middle East, every country. It wasn't just China, Taiwan, but every country and every region was facing the same issues. And we saw significant similar trends and spikes. And they were also consuming, and it was typically, when I look at these charts, normally, like in February and January, business, data science, and computer science were the three domains that people were looking at, generally speaking, learning wise. And even those curves were never like this straight line vertical, but those were the three top domains. Now, what you see here, what has actually happened, as lots of students, lots of different broad sectors of the population started going online learning, they brought in with their preferences for all kinds of skills. And one of the top, I think, has been the personal development and life sciences. Personal development, mental wellness, personal health, and then life sciences, especially in the public health domain, like COVID kind of crisis, coronavirus. People have forgotten, like, I think in general, obviously, in our communities, especially, we're so much more tuned to technology, especially living in Silicon Valley. But I think what you see here is the idea around public health and how unprepared we were from a public health perspective, both knowledge, people, capabilities, and technology, all of that coming together. And so we saw that, and then also soft skills, continue to see the soft skills around arts and humanities, and high school level stuff, especially math and logic, language learning, science and engineering. A lot of these courses were also starting to see big pickup. And that's what we've seen also. The Science of Wellbeing was the highest enrolled course in March on Coursera. And this is taught by a preeminent Yale professor. I've taken this course, phenomenal course. Part of what a crisis, something like this, which is unprecedented, does to people is a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. And there's huge levels of unemployment right now. and companies have shut down, and you're working remote, schools have shut down, and you're at homes. And so there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about the future. And we do feel like, learning and education is a real solution. Every time you run into these stress situations, that's your go-to, because that's how you're going to come out on the other side. And so Science of Wellbeing was an interesting discovery for us. And then, as I mentioned, public health, science matters. This was a course Imperial College London put together in 2 weeks, and they launched it on Coursera. And this became the second most popular course. So there's appetite for knowledge, appetite for information. The key thing for me, I talk about always, is having that curiosity, having that appetite for learning and knowledge is what is going to make a difference difference between people who are going to progress forward in situations like this, but versus people who are going to regress, are the ones that will take on the challenge and develop curiosity and kind of how you continue your learning journey and actually accelerate that learning journey, in fact.